Welcome back to AM Agenda, and now it's time for our panel. I'm joined in the studio here in Sydney by Stephen Jones, Labor MP, and in our Melbourne studio, Kelly O'Dwyer, Liberal MP. Welcome to you both.
Great to be with you.
Now, Stephen, if I could start with you, must be an enormous sigh of relief in the government over Craig Thomson this morning, with the New South Wales Police saying no charges are going to be pursued, no crime is committed.
What we've seen over the last fortnight is frantic speculation and accusations. We know Craig Thomson has denied the allegations. And this morning we see the New South Wales Police have said there is no criminal activity for us to be investigating here. So I think it's time that we got on and started debating the more important issues, such as the state of our economy and how we move the country forward.
All right, Kelly O'Dwyer, I'll come to you in a minute, but can we just have a listen to what Wayne Swan has said this morning about this issue?
It's a pretty categorical statement, and I think what it does is it exposes Mr Abbott's tactics, his tactics to wreck everything, to talk everything down, and to throw as much mud as possible, regardless of the facts.
Kelly O'Dwyer, you heard what Wayne Swan had to say, but the fact that New South Wales Police has said no crime has been committed and that there wasn't even enough evidence to warrant a full investigation, further investigation, does that indicate that your side of politics and George Brandis got it wrong and were really just wishing and hoping that there might have been something substantive there?
Well, Helen, the government is desperate to declare today that somehow this issue has gone away. They're very keen to sweep this issue again under the carpet. But let's not forget who raised this issue in the first instance. It wasn't Tony Abbott, it wasn't George Brandis, it was the Health Services Union itself who referred this matter to Fair Work Australia. There is an investigation ongoing, and it's an investigation into how the Health Services Union have used the funds that were provided to them by members of the union. Now, these
should it have
members
stayed at
are
Fair
members
Work
who are
Australia
nurses
and not gone by George Brandis to, urge the police to have a criminal investigation?
Well, the Health Services Union spoke with, as I understand it, the police in its investigation. What's very clear here is that the Prime Minister still has clear questions to answer in relation to the Labor Party providing money to Craig Thomson to settle his legal bills. There are clear questions for Craig Thomson to answer in terms of what he used his credit card for when he was the Secretary of the Health Services Union. There are clear questions for both Craig Thomson and the government to answer. There has not been a full and frank disclosure of those events. The government is very keen to pretend that there is nothing to see here, but we know from the union itself that there are serious concerns as to misuse of union funds, and those union funds come from members. And if I were a member of the Health Services Union, I'd want answers.
All right, are you saying you don't accept the New South Wales Police, their verdict on this?
What I'm saying is that there are still questions that remain to be answered. So
therefore you don't accept what they have come up with, that no crime has been committed?
Well, as I understand it from the reports today, there is a referral to the Victorian Police. There are still matters, as I understand it, under investigation, but irrespective of that, the Prime Minister and Craig Thomson need to come clean with some answers to some pretty basic questions.
All right, Stephen Jones, does he still need to come forward with answers, and the Prime Minister as well?
We've said right from the start that this is a matter properly conducted by the police, not the politicians. There are important issues that we should be discussing in our national debate. We've seen the opposition running around with a tin of kerosene and a box of matches trying to put more and more fuel into this one. It's not working. The New South Wales Police have knocked it on the head. Now let's get back to the real issues that should be the focus of political discussion.
Well, Stephen, it's not just the opposition, as you well know. Cathy Jackson, who's the current Secretary of the Health Services Union, had a lot to say on this matter, and I think that there are a number of other people who've expressed concerns within the union movement, and there are some very clear questions to be answered. There is a
police investigation that has just knocked this on the head. Yes, it's been referred to Victoria. You're going through the same process as you did over the last fortnight, trying to talk about anything except policy. Let's have a discussion around policy and let the police do their job.
All right, well, let's move on. The asylum seeker issue. Now, Kelly Thomson, can you explain from your side of politics, is Mr Abbott going to support legislative changes to the Migration Act so that some sort of offshore processing can go ahead, or is he only going to do it if it excludes Malaysia?
Well, what's very clear from the briefings yesterday, as Tony Abbott has said, is that the government has no policy whatsoever on this issue. We know that the government is hopelessly divided. There are some within the government who declare that it is important to have offshore processing, and we have said that we are prepared to work with the government in relation to that. There are others like Stephen Jones, and I'll be very interested to hear his comments as somebody who's on the left of the Labor side in politics, who have also declared that it's important to have onshore processing. You have got a government hopelessly divided. Let's not forget...
Can I just ask you, from your side of politics, what is your position? And then I'll ask Stephen.
Our position is very clear, and it has been consistent throughout. We believe that the government made the wrong decision in August of 2008 to unwind the Howard government's reforms on border protection. We believed that Nauru and Manus Island were appropriate offshore processing centres and that temporary protection visas worked. We have seen since that change over 12,000 people arrive by boat on over 240 boats here in Australia. Last year we had an average of about 574 people arrive every single month. This is an incompetent government who have botched this policy. We are prepared to work with the government to help fix a mess that they have created.
But that's excluding Malaysia, Kelly O'Dwyer.
Well, Malaysia is something that I know that there are members of the Labor Party, they have rejected.
All right.
They said that Nauru... Well, can I just make this one final point, Helen? They said that Nauru was somehow not an appropriate place to have an offshore processing centre because they were not signatories to the UN Convention on Refugees. Malaysia is not a signatory to that. Nauru now is a signatory to that. And we have this really completely split policy on the Labor Party, who on the one hand think that Malaysia is somehow appropriate and on the other hand say in the next breath that the Nauru isn't. I mean, it's not consistent.
Thank you. Stephen Jones, what are you going to do now? Because there is no policy on the table from your government. Malaysia has been completely knocked out, it would seem, by the High Court. You're talking about changing legislation, but you have some support from the coalition, but not the sort of support you want. There's no policy on the table, is there?
Let's be clear, Malaysia has been knocked out, but so has Nauru. And let's go back to basics. What are we trying to do here? Our objective is to ensure that we, as a wealthy country within the region, play our role in taking in as many as possible people who are displaced because they are refugees within the region. There's over 90,000 of them in Malaysia, about the same number in Indonesia at the moment. We do that in an orderly way. We do that in a way... Hear me out on this, this is an important point. We do that in a way that doesn't give preference to people who can afford to pay over those who can't afford to pay to get here. Now, if deterrence is going...
Kelly, sorry, you did have a good say.
If deterrence is going to be a part of our solution, a part of our policy, that is, we'll put in place measures which deter people from getting on boats. Let's ensure that that process actually works.
All right,
now,
is it onshore or offshore processing?
All the expert advice that is available to us is that Nauru won't work. The reason it won't work is because 95% of the people who were detained on Nauru ended up in Australia. Now, if I know that, the people smugglers know that.
All right, do you want onshore processing now to be Labor's policy?
We want a process that works, and the people that I'm talking to take the unremarkable position that the Labor Party's platform should be our starting position in putting in place a policy. Now, when we get together in Canberra next week, a few days from now, we will have a thoroughgoing discussion on that. We'll have the advice from the department, and we'll have some more concrete propositions to discuss.
But
I said right from the very beginning, Kelly, I'll tell you what it means, and it means that we aren't going to be rushed into any knee-jerk response to this. The decision of the High Court, which reflects...
But there is... Sorry, Kelly, just one moment, if you wouldn't mind. Mr Abbott is offering his support, but he does say that there needs to be a policy on the table so he knows what he's supporting. It's a fair point, isn't it? There is no policy on the table.
And there will be a policy on the table, but what Mr Abbott is saying is, I will accept anything that is Nauru. And all of the advice, and there's a pattern that emerges here, the advice that he got yesterday is Nauru won't work. And there's a pattern that emerges here. He rejects all of the expert advice, whether it's economic or climate change or scientific. Tony Abbott always knows best. Nauru won't work, so let's have a serious discussion about what will work.
We're going to run out of time. Kelly, it is interesting that the Immigration Department officials have told Tony Abbott and the government that sending people back to the point of entry is the best deterrent. Malaysia might have offered that. What do you say to that? Because he's still rejecting that.
Well, we've looked to the past, we've looked at what has worked in the past, and it's very, very clear. What's worked in the past is offshore processing in Nauru and on Manus Island in conjunction with temporary protection visas. We've been consistent in our policy. Unlike the government, who've had several different policies and panic responses on this whole issue that have created this enormous mess, which we're now seeing onshore in our detention centres with such things as riots and people trying to get onto leaky boats to come to this country. We've seen a complete mess here, and what we've said is that we need to have a consistent, clear and transparent policy. What we know worked in the past was offshore processing in Nauru and on Manus Island, and we support that policy.
We will have to leave it there. We didn't even get to talk about the very good GDP figures. I'm sorry, we have run out of time. Kelly O'Dwyer in Melbourne, Stephen Jones in Sydney, thanks so much for joining me.
Good to be with you.
And that's all for this edition of AM Agenda. Join Ashley Gillen at 1:30 Eastern for Lunchtime Agenda. I'm Helen Dowley. See you soon.